The average Australian high school covering 6-year groups has around 600 students and around 45 teaching and non-teaching staff. So statistically, the likelihood of a death occurring within a school community is high. Yet most schools continue to have a reactive rather than proactive approach when it comes to preparing for these often sudden and devastating events. Complications from illness, car accidents, suicides, and terminal diagnoses can all occur whether you're in a school or not. So how should a school handle a death within its community? Which schools have done it well and which have failed miserably? Before we begin, we post death and dying videos every Friday. So if that sounds like something you'd be interested in, consider subscribing to the channel. Now let's talk about deaths in school communities. While preparing for this video, I looked back at my own experiences. 12 years as a student in primary and high school, followed by 6 years working in a school environment. The deaths I remember reflect on just how common this issue really is. When I was in year 6, a boy in year 2 was hit by a car while riding his tricycle. When I was in year 8, a year 12 student died in a car crash. When I was in year 9, a staff member died of a terminal cancer diagnosis. While working out of school, our bus driver had a heart attack behind the wheel and died. A student from our brother's school died by suicide on school grounds. And a boarding school student on another campus passed away in her sleep from diabetes complications. That's not even counting the multiple deaths of parents and siblings of students in my year group or under my care as a staff member. Now, I have no memory of how the school handled the boy's death when I was in primary school, but I do remember school assemblies, announcements, and masses that were held during high school. And as you watch this video, I encourage you to think back to your own schooling days. What were the deaths that occurred within your school community and how were they handled? And just as a quick side note here, this is an Australian channel, so we'll mostly be looking at how Australian schools typically manage deaths. Mass casualty events like shootings and earthquakes thankfully aren't common here, so we won't be covering that. With that said, let's have a look at the good and the bad examples of school responses. What should schools do when there is a death? How much easier would all this be if staff were already death accepting and had strong death literacy? Just so much easier. Staff who are comfortable talking about death would be able to automatically put effective processes in place rather than waiting for a crisis team to show up. And that's exactly what our company is working to support, helping schools build the capacity to handle these difficult moments with strength and compassion. A good response to a death includes communication that is fast, transparent, compassionate, and provides ongoing support. This comes naturally when staff are death accepting rather than death avoidant. In contrast, schools packed with death avoidant staff often respond poorly, with silence, rush returns to normal, poor communication, and inadequate mental health support. And students aren't stupid. They see exactly what's happening, especially in today's world where mental health is openly discussed. Trying to shove grief under the rug is not only ineffective, but reflects very poorly on leadership. Strong leadership during a crisis requires the ability to confidently and compassionately guide a cohort through grief. Leaders must be reliable, approachable, and capable of giving solid, useful answers to difficult questions. As we go through some examples, you'll see where the strong leadership stood out and where its absence created serious harm. So what should schools do after a death in their community? Well, there are 6 essential steps schools should follow. First, immediate communication. Staff, students, and parents must be notified quickly with factual, sensitive information. Avoid graphic details or glamorizing the death, especially crucial if the death was by suicide. And at the same time, avoid demonizing or stigmatizing the person who died. Second, consult mental health experts. Schools should bring a specialist crisis team, for example, the Department of Education support staff, school psychologists, or Headspace, ideally within the first 24 to 48 hours. Staff need to be briefed on how to talk about death sensitively, steering clear of myths or unhelpful language like, "she's in a better place." If you want to know more about that, check out our video on things not to say to the bereaved. Thirdly, offer grief and mental health support. Schools should set up quiet rooms or reflection rooms staffed with trained counsellors. Counselling should be voluntary, easily accessible, and available for the long term, not just for 1 or 2 days. Schools should also watch closely for vulnerable students, such as close friends or classmates of the deceased, and students with pre-existing mental health struggles. Fourthly, respectful memorialisation. Allow space for grief, such as condolence books, flower tributes, or student art projects. Memorial activities should be temporary, lasting between 1 and 2 weeks, and must be handled sensitively, especially after a suicide. Permanent memorials are generally discouraged in such cases to avoid unintentionally glorifying the death. Fifth, return to routine carefully. Routine is important for providing stability, but schools should not rush students back to normal. Flexibility with assignments and exams is encouraged. Fun events like school carnivals might want to be postponed out of respect. Lastly, if the death was by suicide, there are specific additional protocols to follow, like those recommended by Headspace or the Department of Education. The goal here is to reduce risk of further suicides, support grieving students, and manage media coverage carefully. The fact we have to manage media coverage at all is crazy. Hi all! This is your reminder that Taboo Education is an educational company as well as a YouTube channel, and we help guide Aussie schools through these matters on a regular basis. Again, we like to be more proactive about the matter rather than reactionary. So if you would like your staff or students to learn more about the history, practicalities, biology, or psychology around death, please send us an email via our website in the description. Now let's look at the good, the bad, and the ugly responses that schools have had over the years. Schools that handled it well. In 2019, a Year 12 student from a Sydney boys' grammar school died by suicide, importantly not on campus. The school acted swiftly. Students and parents received a carefully worded communication offering factual information without unnecessary details. Grief counsellors were available the very next morning. Students were given the choice to attend school for support or stay at home. Memorial activities like writing messages and creating a remembrance tree were student-led and optional. Staff were trained on how to talk to students without glorifying the death, and although that probably should have been done long before the tragedy actually happened. Overall, the school handled a difficult situation very well. In 2021, a Melbourne public high school lost a student to a sudden illness. School leadership immediately collaborated with the Department of Education's critical incident response team. Classes were optional for the next few days and memorial services were made available. Communication with parents stressed the importance of watching for signs of trauma at home, and regular updates were sent out over the following month outlining ongoing supports. Because this was a natural illness rather than a traumatic death, the response was still strong but understandably different from the suicide example earlier. In 2012, 2 students from a girls' grammar school were killed in a car accident. The school organised an assembly with trained grief counsellors, normalised the many different grief reactions students may experience, and provided quiet rooms even during the crucial Year 12 exam period. They adjusted the exam schedule and offered parents free workshops on supporting grieving teenagers. Again, a strong, well thought out response that recognised both immediate and long-term needs. Schools that handled it poorly. Unfortunately, not every school gets it right. In 2015, a student from a regional Victorian school died by suicide, and the school decided to not mention it at all. Fearing copycat behaviour, they told students to get on with it and carried on business as usual. No grief counsellors, no space for mourning, no acknowledgement of what had happened. Students were left feeling angry, confused and abandoned, and many later reported that it made their grief worse. It's clear the school did not seek advice from the Department of Education, and it showed. In 2018, a Gold Coast high school faced another tragedy when a student died in a traffic accident on their way to school. The school sent out a cold, blunt email with no support resources and offered no memorials or assemblies. Some teachers were even overheard making insensitive comments like "life goes on," which understandably caused a lot of resentment amongst students and parents. Perhaps the most shocking recent example comes from last year, 2024, when a Year 7 student of an independent Catholic girls' school in Sydney, I mention that because it means they have the access and money to find the resources, reportedly took her own life after years of bullying. Her family and friends created a small memorial outside the school grounds, a very common and harmless act of remembrance common here in Australia. However, the school removed the memorial shortly afterwards, claiming advice from mental health experts. Now I, like many other mental health experts, called bullshit at the time, and later it was revealed that indeed no reputable organisation such as Headspace had actually recommended this, leading to public outrage and a formal apology from the school. Even from a basic PR perspective, it was a disastrous decision that showed a fundamental misunderstanding of grief support and crisis management. The bottom line is, schools must have structures in place before a tragedy occurs. Death is part of life. Ignoring it only makes it harder for young people to navigate grief and loss. If you are a school leader or part of a school community looking to improve your death literacy and preparedness, this is exactly what our work is about. I provide training and workshops that help schools move from death avoidant to death competent, giving staff and students the skills they need to manage loss in a healthy and supportive way. If you would like to bring this work to your school, please reach out via the email in our website. The link will be in the description. And with that, go talk death.